everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Chillin With The Villain podcast. Today, I am a very sick villain, and I also have a sick co-host as well. It's funny that we start the year and that we're both sick, but you know what they say, the show must go on, and today we are celebrating. I don't know if that's the right word, but today we are at least covering the 25th anniversary of the Fingerpoke of Doom. Now, I know the Fingerpoke of Doom has been covered by lots and lots of people, but I was always wondering, like, what actually happened on the rest of the Nitro episode that night? How good or how bad was the show with this sort of infamous moment in professional wrestling? So today we're going to review the Nitro from from January 4th, 1999. I told you
he's not well, guys.
Leave him alone. Leave me alone. And Sam, you're a little sick today as well.
Yep. Last episode, we're like, our New Year's resolution, I want to be more productive. We're going to kill it and everything. And then straight out of the gate, next episode, we're both just sick as dogs. But we've got to crack on. We are. And I can't wait until I'm not sick because I'm traveling to Austria tomorrow for the week. And I didn't really fancy trying to do this podcast in Austria. And oh, man. So we're doing this for you, the listeners. We are indeed. Now, you mentioned that this incident, the Fingerpoke of Doom, has been done to death. You said, hey, do you want to do the script this week or should I? And I said, I've never actually heard of the Fingerpoke of Doom. So you should probably do the script. It sounds like I'm probably one of the only people in the world who haven't heard of this, but also even after watching it, I still don't think I could do the script. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, I think typically that's why I wanted to cover it today, because I think most wrestling fans have at least heard of the Fingerpoke of Doom, but I don't think they really know everything exactly or really understand it. So hopefully I can maybe give a little bit of insight today. Let's see.
I feel like there's background context or missing context that's outside of the episode. I don't know. We'll find out. I'm going to find out live on this podcast, right, from you.
Well,
what's going on?
You will, and well, to a degree, yes. WCW. We've covered an episode of Thunder from WCW in the year 2000 before, and that was really kind of out of control and chaotic and pretty hard to follow and understand. And it seems like 1999 was right up there, and maybe not as crazy as 2000, but it was pretty up there. And it is interesting to go back and watch these shows and see why, for example, Nitro was winning or Raw was winning. And there's actually something else very significant that happens in this show. So, you know what? I don't want to waste any more time. I'm not feeling too great, so I guess we'll just get straight to it.
So, let's just get straight to business.
So the year is 1999, January 4th. Nitro is in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, Georgia, the same building where 6 months, I believe, earlier, Goldberg had defeated Hogan for the championship belt. And the place is packed. I think this is pretty significant. Like, they say 40,000 people in attendance. It may have been less, but either way, it was certainly a good house. So I won't give the rating for the show now. I will give it a little bit later because we can tie it into something else. So the show starts with actually a pretty cool video package of, I believe, from the week before, Kevin Nash defeating Bill Goldberg, ending his streak. And they do a whole video package at the start of the show. And I thought, it's 1999, so the editing and everything else is not mind-blowing, but still the fact that they're letting us know what happened last week, I feel like, some wrestling shows that doesn't really happen. So at least they're attempting somewhat to get us up to scratch. That was another really big kind of controversial moment in WCW and something that people point to as the downfall of WCW. Goldberg losing to Kevin Nash, losing the streak, having Nash screw him and the taser with Scott Hall and everything else. Obviously Goldberg was pretty much, I guess, along with DDP, but Goldberg was the main star that WCW created. And people often criticize WCW for not creating their own stars and just buying them from the WWF. But you got to give it to them. They did make a star in Bill Goldberg, and people still talk about Goldberg to this day. What was your opinion, Sam, on the streak being broke and the fact that it was by Kevin Nash and in this fashion?
Okay, so if someone's going to break a streak of like a big guy, it has to be a big guy, right?
Mhm.
So the fact that it's Kevin Nash I'm fine with. I don't even like streaks, by the way. I like someone's gimmick just being they don't lose. It's just
Right.
to me like super lame. I know you've mentioned that before as well.
Right.
It just like I don't like them full stop. But yeah, so
I mean, the
I'd
problem
rather it's
is
just never been a thing.
this, like having a streak gimmick. The thing is, it's got to end at some point anyway,
Yeah.
right? Unless
Yeah.
they just say undefeated their whole entire career. I guess like Andre, even Andre did the jobs from time to time, but it's got to end some way. I guess the argument would be that it should have been somebody younger. They should have used it to establish someone else into the main event. Pass the torch. Maybe a Scott Steiner could have been. There could be an argument for Scott Steiner or an argument for a Booker T. But here's the thing: when you go back and watch it, Kevin Nash, like the people pop huge when Nash beats him, and that could have, that potentially could have just been because it was like a shocking moment. But when the Undertaker lost his streak, people weren't popping. They were like, "What?" But with Goldberg, the crowd was going nuts. And also, I think there was a big risk at the time of the crowd turning on Bill Goldberg because he just came in and did the same thing. And I think if you watch some of those episodes of Nitro, I have seen some when the crowd are kind of, a portion of the crowd are kind of turning on Goldberg, so, screaming like Goldberg sucks or whatever it was. And that wasn't happening with Steve Austin on the WWF. Do you know what I mean? Like the top babyface, he wasn't getting any boo. So, and Austin, he lost from time to time. And it's not like Kevin Nash beat him just kind of flat. Like they stacked it up in terms of how much he cheated. The whole Wolfpack's out there and the taser and everything else. So, I didn't have a massive problem with it. Could it have been used to establish?
Was that to like
else?
keep Goldberg like looking strong?
Yeah.
Is that the point of that? Right.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know, but I think people, they really kind of dramatize it when they say, oh, and people also, because Kevin Nash booked in 1999, yes, 999, people assume that he booked this, but this was like December of 98, and he didn't start booking till February. So it wasn't on Nash. I'm just a big Nash mark, so maybe I'm defending him.
We mentioned Nash last week when we talked about the Magic Mike movies, and I asked you which Magic Mike you prefer, the first one or the second one. Did you know there's a third one that's been out for nearly a year?
Oh, really?
What's I had no clue. I don't even know. No, it's like Magic Mike's Last Dance, I think. Yeah, I had no clue. I found out when editing the last episode. I was like, hang on a minute. I wonder if I was like looking stuff up. So, every time we say something, I kind of research it in the editing, and if it's something with just one of us is just completely made up, I just like edit it. So I was like looking at Magic Mike, I was like, what? There's a third one?
How often do I make stuff up?
Oh, it's half of the edit. You did really well last week. You were worried about your Batista saying he was broke before Guardians of the Galaxy. I looked into that, and no, he did say that. So you did, you did a very good job.
So we should get back into this Nitro. So after this nice little video baggage, they start the show with this Nitro party, and I guess there was a competition where someone could win to have their own suite at Nitro, and obviously they're in a stadium, so they go and there's the announcer. I didn't even really recognize the announcer, but he's there with all these men at this Nitro party, and they're all going nuts. It looks more like a what is it called? Is it tailgating that they do in the States?
Yeah.
Right. It's
or like a frat
that.
Party or something.
Party, yeah. And they interview the guys, and they're, we're all big Goldberg marks. I don't think they say that, but I don't know. It's kind of a unique concept that Nitro used to do. They had this idea of Nitro parties, and the idea was that you would film your Nitro party, send in VHS into Nitro, and like every week they would show one on TV, like who had the best Nitro party. And I think that was, a pretty cool concept. And if you know what's funny, and I'll talk about it more in this review, but the fans have changed a lot in the last 25 years. Do you know what I mean? Like you watch the fans in this audience, there's a lot of grown-ass men that are just like you said, look like they're from a frat party, or they just look like sport fans. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And there's like a lot of women in the crowd. There's kids in the crowd. There's old people in the crowd. There's a lot of range in the audience. I feel like in this day and age, it's typically basically like what I'm doing right now. Like it's guys wearing black t-shirts, sort of aged, that key demo, whatever it is. What is it? Like between 20 and like 45 or whatever.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Right. That's like the whole audience now, right? You don't see really old people. You don't see a lot, I guess with WWE more so, you see some kids. But
you see kids, yeah.
You don't really see many old people. So it's definitely became more concentrated, would you say? It's definitely more broad back here.
Yeah, but, for sure. So what I really liked about those Nitro parties, and you can say like it's all tacky, and with the Nitro girls, like the dancing at the start, and they keep cutting back to the dancing, which is terrible. They're all like out of sync and everything. The Nitro party's really goofy, but WCW back then were like trying to make wrestling an event, like every week, and I really appreciate. And they did, and I really like that. Yeah, like they make it an event.
I mean,
that, man.
Yeah,
they do that for pay-per-views now, which is cool. Totally, but just the fact that it's just on TV every week and they treated it with such like, how would you even put it? Just like there's a lot of gravitas behind wrestling. It may be sloshy, all those guys in the party and hang out, but like everyone, it's an event. Everyone's out. Like you said, the family's out, the guys are out. I really, that was my kind of favorite takeaway of this. Is just like how they kind of treated the show. Like
and that was a thing. We did do like Nitro parties or Raw parties. I remember in the UK, they would show Nitro used to come on at like I want to say either 7 or 8, and then Raw would start like an hour later. And I used to go to my friends, and some other friends would come over. We'd watch like the first hour of Nitro, then we'd watch Raw, and it would be a big event. And obviously, back then, it may have even started really late, like 10 p.m. Raw, I think, because I know it was always a struggle for me to stay awake to the end. But back then you could have parties because it was the only real way to watch it. It's not like now where it's just so easy. Like I don't even have TV now. Do you know what I mean? So, wrestling in 1999, it was hot, and they're showing us. Me personally, I've never been a fan of the Nitro girls. I just like what's funny about it. It's kind of like, because throughout the show, they keep going back to the Nitro girls dancing in the ring. And it's like, why? Like, are they trying to fill time? Or like they start the show with it. It's like they're trying to fill time at the start of the show. I feel like maybe they did later on, but I feel like if they were going to have the Nitro girls, they should have had them more involved with the wrestlers and the storylines. In fact, one of these Nitro girls I recognize as Charmel.
Yes, Booker T's wife.
Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure Shawn Michaels' wife was a Nitro girl as well.
Okay,
I'm not sure if he's still with her, but I think the Nitro girls were just like local dancers that they hired and weren't really getting paid that much, and obviously probably weren't experienced, in professional wrestling or anything else. But to me, it just didn't seem. I don't know. I didn't think. I think girls maybe on the ramp would have been better, maybe. Well, like the first TNA, I'm thinking.
Like in TNA, but what, in a cage?
In a cage. No, it's been more like football, American football.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They even had an ad for a Nitro Girls yearly calendar that you can put on your wall. And actually, what's funny about that ad is, I assume it was Peacock, the phone number to call to order your calendar, they blurred out.
Yeah,
but the voiceover just still says the number there, which was 1-800 WCW 8661. I'm going to call it now. Let's see. But I just thought it was kind of funny that like it's so big that there's like you said calendars and there was a MasterCard with them on.
Yeah. Well, also I think one of these ads, I'm not sure if it was that one or something else. Like they had a PO box and it was Tampa as well. I was wondering whose PO box do you think that is? Because like the WCW, like the headquarters was in Atlanta. So like, I don't know. It was in Tampa for some reason. Only us wrestling nerds will kind of care about this.
Worry
stuff,
about this sort of stuff. I know. I know.
right. So the show finally starts, and we get Hugh Morris with Jimmy Hart versus Glacier, in which Hugh Morris defeats Glacier in a whopping 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Now, I think you learned early on when we started the podcast, when I told you about episode 2, when I told you about WCW bringing in this sort of Mortal Kombat
rip-offs
division. Yeah. What's so funny about Glacier is because they had such awesome vignettes to build up to it. And obviously the joke was they just went on forever and ever, to the point where they built up all this anticipation for Glacier to debut. And the entrance, they spent all this money originally on the entrance to make it all impressive. And I think there was snow and everything else. But the man that played Glacier, it's really terrible. I can't remember his name now. I've met him a handful of times. Like, he just really wasn't fit for this role. And not only that, but like, once he takes off his entrance gear, like, he's just a dude in a blue singlet. Like, why did he not put more effort? If they wanted to do Sub-Zero, I mean, obviously you don't want him dressed up as Sub-Zero, but he could have looked way cooler with his ring gear than just wearing a blue singlet, right?
Yeah, it was funny because like I was trying to even I was like, okay, so this is 1999. Was Mortal Kombat 4 out then? What does Sub-Zero look like in that? He's kind of taking
out that year, right? The movie?
I think it did. Yeah. Oh, the movie? No, the movie.
No, the first one came out in 95. Yeah. Sorry.
I think he's taking Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3's Sub-Zero because he's got like a scar across his eye, and Glacier has like one contact lens. And then I was just like doing this. I was like, hang on a minute, what am I doing? Why am I going? It's like you with this Tampa PO box. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why are we giving such stock to these crazy Nitro ideas?
I don't know. I just don't think he was the right person. Kind of like we were talking about the right person to play the Mordecai role. And I was thinking who could have played Glacier? And I was doing a little bit of research, and there is actually an interview with Rob Van Dam where he says like, oh, I think maybe they were considering me for this Glacier role, or maybe that's just what he speculated. But I think if they had Rob Van Dam play Glacier, he would have fit way better. And he definitely would have fitted, much better in with that Mortal Kombat kind of theme. Do you know what I mean?
Martial arts, like his combat skills, for sure.
Yeah. But either way.
Also, Sub-Zero isn't like a big guy.
Right. Yeah. Sub-Zero seems to be better fit for like a high flyer or a smaller dude, right? I wouldn't think of him as like a power guy like Glacier was.
Yeah. I don't know. He's not a big guy. Like the guy who played Glacier, and the way he comes in with his entrance attire, he could have been like a Shao Kahn inspired guy, if he had a big mallet or something. But that's obviously not as iconic, right? As Sub-Zero. Right. They're just taking like whatever they can find in the middle. I deeply regret calling that 1-800-WCW 8661 number. I'm going to expect a lot of robocalls now. It asked me if anyone in my household is 50 or older. So it's clearly one of those preying on old people scam numbers now. Geez. So I'm going to get a lot of robocalls through this. I'll edit them out.
Let's change your number.
I'm going to have to now. Guys, don't call the number.
Don't call the number.
That's why it was blurred out.
We've done it for you, yeah.
Peacock was trying to save me from myself. Yeah.
So speaking of saving from ourselves, then shows a video recap of basically just summing up the whole Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff feud, which sort of stemmed from real life heat between the two. They show a lot of that famous promo of Flair when he's in the ring and he's kind of promo on Bischoff, and he's saying, you call me a broke, and he's like taking off. He's like, Hugo Boss shoes or whatever it is, Versace shirt, and he ends up getting into his underwear.
Just
it's one of the
boxer shorts.
Yeah, and then he handcuffs himself to the ropes. It's one of the greatest Flair promos ever. Like so good. And it got me thinking, like, man, there was a lot of, again, like when we reviewed Raw in the past, it's like, dude, you'd watch like those Raws from like late 90s, and it's like every week there was like a famous moment happened. Right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it kind of seems similar with Nitro, and it's like, wow, it's just not like that in this day and age, Or a lot of times it's like multiple classic moments on one show. This one has 2 as well, which we'll get into.
We'll get to that, yeah.
Yeah, but so this video package turns into Ric Flair turning up. He's won a match where he's now the president of WCW, and Bischoff is essentially fired from his role as president. Flair comes to the ring with his whole posse, his family. He's got his, most notably has, I don't know if this is her debut, but he has a young Charlotte Flair come to the ring with him, which I thought was pretty like a fun bit. She doesn't seem to smile the whole time.
No.
I noticed that. And his son is there, Arn Anderson, Mongo. And the way they did it, do you know what I was thinking about watching this? So I think they turn up in like a limousine or a nice car out the back. You see him get out the car, the whole posse come together. There's some policemen with them, security, and they all walk through the building. Then they come to their entrance and walk to the ring to cut this promo. But yeah, watching this entrance, it definitely made Flair seem like a really big deal, especially just like with the policemen, the security, then this whole posse around him. And it got me thinking about, it's a while back on the podcast, but I was commenting on Will Ospreay's AEW debut, or at least when he came out to announce he'd been signed. And this, you know, and with Ospreay, I was saying, I feel like they should have made a bigger deal out of it. They should have really billed him as the best wrestler in the world. And I said, have security, have a posse with him. I think I even said he should land in a helicopter. Or
you did. Yeah.
But this entrance kind of made me think
Same
of
vibes,
the Ospreay idea. Yeah, I mean, I think with the Ospreay one, they could have made it even bigger. But you know, I was thinking about that watching this Flair entrance, and they're actually this episode of Nitro has a lot of faults, but I did like how I liked back then how they used to use a lot of different areas for the show. Do you know what I mean? And do a lot of off-site stuff, and some, you know, we go around the building, we even get outside the building at some point. And I really like that, because especially when these wrestling shows, if they're 3 hours long and you're just like looking at the same thing the whole time, like the ring in the arena, it's kind of like, there's not a whole lot to keep you gripped, you know? But
no variety,
right. If we keep going off-site and doing all this different stuff, it's going to keep you gripped. So
yeah, sure.
But yeah, Flair does this whole promo basically just saying how he's the president now. They set up David Flair wrestling, being Ric Flair's tag team partner, and unfortunately it never worked out for David Flair. Have you ever seen him wrestle, Sam?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, we'll try and keep it that way.
yeah. Charlotte's better. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Charlotte definitely got the wrestling genetics and the wrestling genes. Yeah. Arn Anderson was here, and he looked pretty old. How old do you think Arn Anderson was here?
Okay, so I was looking at Arn Anderson,
and
I was thinking,
looked this up?
No, not looking. I didn't look this up. I thought, when I wear that exact same style of glasses, I just look like a creep. He looks like a kind of like a really cool old guy, but I'm kind of puzzled as to how old he was. I was like, I wish I looked like that when I'm Arn Anderson's age. It's like, how old is Arn Anderson?
So it says
I'd be happy to look like that now, to be honest. It's pretty badass.
You might have to do the math for me. It says he was born in September 20th, 1958. So he would have been how old? 41?
No, 65.
What? This was 1999, Sam.
Oh, I was thinking about now.
No, so how?
yeah, I'm so dumb.
I don't care how old he is now. Here, he would have been what? Is that right? 41?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? He looks a bit older than.
You think he looks older than 50? Yeah, I guess he does. But again, I would be happy looking like him now, and I'm 34, so yeah.
Next up, we see a Booker T squash match. I actually missed the guy's name, Emery Hale. When I
Hale or something, yeah.
Hale. Yeah, Booker T. Clearly, this is when they're starting to try and really push Booker T as a singles competitor.
Yeah.
Interesting. I remember this from Booker T. He won the match with a missile dropkick, and he would do that quite a lot back then. I feel like Booker T was always kind of playing around with what his finish should be. And it's funny because the most over thing he did was the spinneroonie. Obviously, that wasn't a wrestling move.
Yeah.
I feel like he was always trying to work out like what should be his finish, because he played with I think they called it the Harlem Hangover, which was basically him doing a front flip into a leg drop from the top rope as his finish. for quite a while, and it just seemed like the most dangerous thing ever. Like Booker T's a big
for him
dude.
or for them.
For both, but mainly for
everyone,
them.
Yeah.
Like it's just to the front flip, kind of like Too Cold Scorpio, I guess. But Booker T did that for a while, and definitely seen some clips of him killing people. He did it in his WrestleMania match against Triple H. He busted it out. I don't think he ever really did it in the WWE, but yeah, that was a pretty brutal finish. The Harlem Hangover, or the Houston Hangover, maybe they called it in the WWE. But and then he had the bookend, which was essentially the rock bottom. And then he also had the scissors kick, which kind of stuck as his finish. But I don't really know how I felt about the scissor kick as a finish. What do you think? It's when they got them bent over and he just...
I know the one. I remember when I was a kid, I was like, that's just a lame fame-asser. It's not though. Like it is different, but that's just how I looked at it as a kid. I actually don't mind it because it's one of those moves. Actually, I'm surprised you like moves that you could perform on anybody, right?
I do.
I know, and I would consider the scissors kick one. But like nowadays, like everyone does like the super kick, right? I think the scissors kick is way more effective or way more interesting. So I actually don't have a problem with the scissors kick. I also do equate that to if you ask me just real quick, Booker T's like trademark move, I would say scissors kick. Well, no, I wouldn't. I'd say you're right. I would say spinneroonie.
Spinneroonie, yeah.
Yes, yeah, but like offensive, I'd say scissors kick. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it. Sounds like you do.
I don't really have a problem with it at all, but I just didn't think it ever really got that great a reaction. Maybe it didn't really.
But it does have like visual like dynamism because he like really gets his leg up and brings.
He's athletic.
I think he's a really athletic guy, so I think he does. I think it's good, but yeah, you are right. It wasn't just.
Well, here's the thing.
Anyway, yeah.
The drop kick from the top wouldn't be a very great finish because it's difficult to set up. Do you know what I mean? It's not the best finish. I don't think you want a finish you can just do. I think at least face to face. I think anything using the ropes, for some reason, I find coming off the top rope like a splash, like an acceptable finish. But for some reason, missile drop kick, I don't know. It's not a bad finish, but I don't think it's like the best. So that's got that issue. The bookend, the problem is everyone just looks at it as the rock bottom, right?
Rock bottom, yeah.
And then the scissors kick didn't really, to me, never really got that much of an amazing reaction. I think he also used to do like more like the scissors kick with the leg lariat, where they were standing and he come across.
Yes.
I actually think that would have been a better finish for him. I thought that looked amazing. Like just wipe them out. Do you know what I mean? That could have been a cool finish. But like Booker T, I really have just gone on to appreciate him much more as I've got older and like I watch stuff back. Like back then I wasn't really a massive fan, but now you watch back and you realize how big he was, how athletic he was, and how charismatic he was. So yeah, big fan of Booker T. He's one of the shining lights of these later years of WCW. Chavo Guerrero comes out next with I think it's Pepe, the
hobby horse thing.
Is that what are they called?
Hobby horse.
A hobby horse, is it?
Yeah. Well, it is in the UK.
I feel like it's called something different in America. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have to edit this out again. But Chavo Guerrero defeats Norman Smiley in 4 minutes and 1 second. Now, it's funny because Norman Smiley had always been this kind of straight-laced. He's actually British. I think he grew up in America. He actually made a big name for himself in Mexico as Black Magic. And then he came to WCW and he was pretty much just a straight wrestler. And he just started getting really over when he started doing the big wiggle and the dance. And people loved it for some reason. And that's pretty much all he had to do. And then later he did the screaming Norman Smiley thing. It is funny how these little silly dances seem to get over in wrestling. Yeah, like there's Daniel Garcia in AEW now, and he does his dance, and the crowd lose their mind. But Chavo here as well, kind of trying to be funny. There's just one spot in here. Chavo had only been wrestling for a couple of years at this point, and he goes to do a springboard and completely slips on the ropes. And he somehow manages to salvage himself, where he lands on the apron, and then he doesn't know what to do. So he launches himself at Norman Smiley, kind of holds him, rolls over and kind of manages to get some kind of pin on him or something. Yeah. And it was and Norman clearly had no idea what he was doing. And it was pretty adventurous, but he kind of managed to to pull it off
salvage it.
somewhat.
Yeah.
He's managed to sound like he meant to do it, you know. So I thought that was funny. And we were talking about the fans, dude. Back in the Attitude Era, so often you would see the fans where it would be a group of guys with their tops off.
Oh
and
yeah,
they'd all
with
like
a
write
letter,
a letter on their chest. And I noticed during this match there was a group of guys. I think it said Goldberg.
I thought it said Jericho.
Did it?
I don't know.
I thought it was
Jericho.
I thought it was Goldberg, but they'd kind of like they weren't standing in the right position. They kind of moved and stuff. It's the impression I got.
Maybe they shuffled. Maybe there was one with every letter, and depending on what wrestler came out, they just all like shuffled around. So maybe it said both. Yeah.
But again, we have not seen that. Used to be a common occurrence in the Attitude Era. We haven't seen that for a long time in professional wrestling now.
No. Do you think they should bring it back?
I think they should.
I think it is funny.
I feel like in this day and age, it probably wouldn't be acceptable.
No, probably not. Do you know if they still do it at like other sports events in the US? Is it still a thing in other, like in football and stuff? I don't know. I genuinely have no idea.
I think maybe I can imagine in the UK when it's, you know, when it's not freezing cold. I can see Brits doing it. Do you know what? Actually, well, there was a news report recently of, I don't know the full story, so maybe I should talk about it, but I just saw a few news articles of American football game, and there's a team and the kid wore like half his face black, half
Kansas
red,
City Chiefs, yes.
The Chiefs, and they said about got a lot of criticisms suggesting it was blackface.
Because they took the photo of like
one side of it.
One side, yeah.
Right. Well, it's funny, but actually in the audience in this show there's actually a dude that had half his face painted black and the other half white as well. Well, it's white, not red. I assume for the NWO, I think. But there's one point where you just see the side of him as well, and just see the black part. And just like, oh geez, like just made me think of that news article,
incident,
that big story. But yeah, the fans, they seem to be. It was back here like more. It was definitely less like. You know, now they're more reserved and they're going to sit there and, you know, they're going to write notes. Or you see people in this day and age, you see fans when a big moment happens, they're all looking down at their phones because they want to be like the first to tweet it or something.
Yeah.
Back here, nobody had phones. And I think that's like just such a golden era where, you know, the wrestling had their full attention, you know, and the fans, they did treat it more like a big sport or event where they would turn up wearing these costumes, or like we said with the letters on their things or face paint, whatever it was. Different time, man. Different time. Speaking of,
are there places in the world that you've been to where they still kind of act more like that? Or is it like a global thing where it's just kind of come down?
I think, maybe come down. I mean, I remember wrestling in Germany when I first started wrestling there. They would do like a lot of football style chants or soccer style chants, and that was kind of different. But no, I mean, in Japan, the audience is a lot of it's men and women, you know, so it's definitely different. But in terms of fans taking their tops off and painting their chest, I don't think I've ever really seen that.
So. Guys, bring this back when you next go to a show. Get your tops off.
Villain.
Guys. Villain, there we go.
Moving on, Chris Benoit defeated Horace Hogan. He's back on the podcast in 3 minutes and 59 seconds. Horace Hogan, I feel like, dude, it's funny because we did a reel about Horace Hogan.
Yeah.
And people, you know, enjoyed it on Instagram. But TikTok is kind of TikTok is a lot more toxic than Instagram. I feel like TikTok audience is more like Twitter. And you know, people were like, oh, it wasn't many, but you know, basically we weren't even burying Horace Hogan. We just said that he looked like a Dollar Tree Stone Cold Steve Austin, which in this the video that we watched,
video he did.
Right. Yeah. And someone's like, oh, he made way more money in wrestling than you did, which I'm pretty positive he actually didn't. But it's kind of like, what's that got to do with anything anyway? So that's a really weird way to kind of contribute to the video. But here, you know, it's just a get over match pretty much for Benoit. The only notable bit, Horace Hogan, obviously he'd been told that he was either boring or needed to do more in the ring because he randomly does like a suicide dive in this match, goes through the ropes or torpedo dive, whatever you want to call it. And he's a really big guy, so that took me by surprise. But yeah, this is just a get over match for Benoit.
So Chris Benoit, man, we're on episode 27. We've somehow, we've done a couple of good Eddie moments. This is the first Chris Benoit's debut on this podcast.
No, it's not.
Like, yeah, it is.
No, it's not.
When else?
We've definitely done.
We have?
Yeah. In fact, he was on episode 2, or the Survivor Series 2002 episode. Teamed up with Kurt Angle in a 3-way tag. Him.
Oh yes, you're right. You are right. I was going to say, like, what an unceremonious debut for the podcast, being on like this dog shit episode of Nitro against Horace Hogan. But honestly, maybe people are going to have a go at me for this. We dunked on Horace Hogan, but here I didn't think he was too bad.
Really?
I thought he did a pretty good. Yeah, no, honestly, yeah, I was expecting just trash.
Right.
But it seems like he tried hard. I'd say.
Dude, I feel like Horace Hogan just represented, like, when I was younger, I found it really hard to get into WCW, and well, during this time period, or at least I would pick watching Raw over Nitro. And a big part of it was I was just confused all the time what was going on in WCW. It was very hard to follow. But another thing was how dark everything was. And it's like, black ring ropes, and all the wrestlers just wore black or black and white. And there was no color at all, no razzmatazz. And Horace Hogan just kind of represents to me like one of those wrestlers that's just out there wearing black gear, kind of no real personality, whereas the WWE had Val Venis and Badass Billy Gunn and Goldust and The Godfather, much brighter personalities. Like WWE, man, like, I don't know if WWE, WWF gets the credit. It does get credit for it, but maybe not quite the credit it deserves for, like, how good they were and are creating stars. And there's going to be a few on this show as well. But just how they managed to, WCW is kicking their ass, and then WWE like, you know what? Well, we're going to work with what we have, and just turn the current wrestlers they had, or they would get a new wrestler that, wasn't a main eventer, and they're just so good at making big stars and giving people that character that is so memorable, because like even the guys I just mentioned, I don't think they were main eventers, but we remember Godfather, we remember Gangrel, we remember Goldust and Val Venis, all these guys.
They're actual characters,
right?
Point to, yes,
absolutely. So,
was Eric Bischoff on commentary by this point? Did that happen yet?
Yeah. So during that Flair promo, they put, I'm not going to fire you. I'm going to put you on commentary, and I guess Bischoff's on commentary, but refusing to talk. Essentially,
isn't he such a good on-air character? I know you said this a million times, but he's so good, man.
He's so good. What's funny, he looks pretty rough here in early '99. Yeah. You could tell the job was getting to him. Like, dude, he must have been so overwhelmed just running WCW. And when he started, he was like a handsome, put together guy. And here he just looks pretty rough. And he comes out and he's wearing a t-shirt and it's either a denim jacket or a leather jacket, jeans and sneakers. And I feel like in this day and age that would be more acceptable. But you got to remember, this is 1999. Like, wearing sneakers was not
no good.
It's not like it is now. Do you know what I mean? I actually heard that story so for the longest time, WWE had like a dress code, and part of the dress code was guys had to wear shoes. And I guess someone had to convince Vince that it was okay for them to wear sneakers. And the way they did it was like, now like these sneakers are worth like 10 times the amount of these shoes. You know what I mean? So then it became okay for the guys to wear sneakers to work.
That's pretty funny. And his son obviously benefited from that.
Yeah.
Always wears his sneakers. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we get into the main storyline. The thread of the evening is basically Goldberg is supposed to be wrestling Kevin Nash in his rematch for the World Championship in tonight's main event. But before he gets the chance to wrestle for the championship, he gets arrested. And basically it's a whole storyline where he's been set up by Miss Elizabeth, where she suggested that Goldberg was stalking her and need to be arrested. Apparently the original pitch for this was that she would say that he sexually abused her,
Oh,
but
God.
Goldberg like said
Flat
no,
out
turned it down,
refused to go
right?
there. Yeah.
Which is probably for the
Rightfully so.
best, right? So
100%.
they turned it into stalking, but yeah. So they take Goldberg to the I guess the Georgia police station and do this whole thing throughout the night where they're questioning Goldberg. He's completely denying it.
Dude, yeah.
What's really funny is like they come to arrest him and he's like, "No, you can't do this," and he's telling him, "I didn't do this," and I do so much good stuff for the community. This is not true. And he's just like telling all the policemen that they can't arrest him. Like they'd be like, "Okay, we won't arrest you." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really,
it was,
really...
yeah, that is a good point. And he knows all the police officers on a first name basis, apparently, but not a couple of them, but most of them. It was just pretty bizarre. He's in this really like comfortable looking fleece, which just looks really odd on Goldberg.
It was like, so
it's funny though.
They keep going back to Goldberg in the police station, or taking him to police station, in the police station, etc., etc. And obviously, this is a way that are going to set up this main event of Hogan and Kevin Nash,
yes,
which we'll get to in a bit. But an interesting way of doing it. I mean, it's obviously very odd that the WCW cameras would be allowed into the police station and like you could watch Goldberg being interviewed. Because at the same time, they keep showing Elizabeth in the police station where they're asking her questions like, well, okay, what's been happening? And she tells them, oh, he's been following me everywhere in the arenas, in the hotels, at the gyms. And basically they're questioning whether her story is legit or not. And obviously we as the viewer know that she's full of crap, but she's just trying to get, it's part of this big master plan. But I thought it was an all right thread throughout the show. There seemed to be a very kind of common thing in the Attitude Era, like people getting arrested and everything else, which makes sense because a lot of times
seen it before on the podcast as well.
Right, we have. Like, I guess it makes sense because there's been a lot of times when things happen in wrestling where you think, well, if that happened in real life, they'd be arrested for it.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So, I didn't have the biggest problem with it. I thought it was relatively entertaining.
I just felt like they dragged.
Yes,
like
they definitely
dragged like hell. Oh my god.
Well, they wanted to keep Goldberg just on the show.
Again, on the show, yeah.
Right, because that's the other thing I forgot, how also Nitro here was a 3-hour episode as well.
Oh man, yeah.
It makes a big difference.
If they have like their biggest star in a backstage bit and you're gonna be focused on him for quite a long period of time, maybe get him on a chair that is not the loudest, squeakiest chair that you've ever heard that's picked up on the microphone. Did you hear that? Just how every time he moved, it was just like the loudest crack, like the loudest squeak ever. And they kept cutting back to it. But what's funny is throughout the rest of the night, he was like dead. When they kept cutting back, he wasn't moving in his chair. He was like dead still. And it wasn't doing it. So I reckon when they cut, they said, hey, Bill, like, don't move. But yeah, those bits just dragged and dragged and dragged. And I felt like the last time we saw a superstar getting arrested thread throughout, narrative throughout.
Oh, the Mountie.
Yeah, I felt like each time they did that, it was a different setup, a different scenario. So it was fresher. Whereas this, it was literally the same, just back. It was just either Elizabeth in her doing her statement or Goldberg in the office just getting grilled, and it was just the same like every time. So I understand that they tried to, like you said, it was nice to have variety on these 3-hour shows, like visually, but then maybe do it a little bit more because it's just more of the same. We needed more variety, and I felt like WWE handled that better. But maybe we should do a top 5 wrestlers getting arrested subplots, and we can
Oh, one of the funny things about Goldberg being arrested, he tells the policeman, he's like, you're going to have, each and every one of you is going to have to try and take me down. Like every type of weaponry will be needed to take me down. And he's like putting up this massive fight. And I'm thinking he's just going to beat them all up. But then he just like kindly agrees to go with them. It's really, but gets put in handcuffs. He's like, okay, let's go. But at first he's all like, he's going to have to take everything to take me down there. So I don't know. It was
funny.
It was interesting, but in between all this sort of main event stuff, event storylines, we have the WCW mid card. Chris Jericho defeats Perry Saturn by disqualification in 8 minutes and 12 seconds. This is a good match, as to be expected, and we kind of spoke about it before, but this was kind of WCW's thing where the mid card, the guys that weren't getting a push and weren't getting paid that great, was kind of like the work rate, and then the main event was like, it was like WCW's undercard was normally good, and then the main events used to kind of be underwhelming or let you down, which is obviously for this episode of Nitro very apparent. But two of the good work rate mid card guys in WCW, Perry Saturn and Jericho, we spoke about them a lot before. We even spoke about how these sort of guys end up sort of changing the style of WWE, because like it seemed like the WWF's mid card were less about work rate but more about character. So guys like Godfather and Val Venus or those sort of guys, whereas WCW, it was less about character and more about work rate. So, and I guess over time when WWF and WCW merged, or WWF bought WCW, it kind of like, I guess they kind of merged the two. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, fun match. Speaking of the mid card, we then see a rather long vignette of Eddie Guerrero running a LWO party, and I don't believe I've ever really seen this before, and I was trying to work out what the kind of storyline was and what was going on. But basically, it's Eddie with all the luchadors, and he's at this party with all these women, and it's basically just kind of like a segment to get Eddie Guerrero over, I guess. They how do I put this? Like the LWO, I feel like, I don't know, they just kind of threw all the luchadors together and were like, oh, that's easier booking for us. I don't know. This segment, Eddie Guerrero is always really entertaining, and I feel like this was some early signs of his like Latino heat gimmick, I guess. But we do say about how like the mid card didn't get pushed and whatnot, but it seems like they're giving quite a lot of time to this, and they put some stock in Eddie Guerrero here.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of it is the rest of the LWO are just kind of like getting sick and tired of him, right? Of his antics. But yeah, it really does showcase his charisma and his style very well. Now, would you classify this as like 100% cinematic segment? Is this one of the first like real cinematic wrestling things that we've had?
Definitely not one of the first. Oh, you mean on the show or just in history?
I'm talking like truly, as in like different camera shots, like different camera angles, like cuts.
Oh no, that'd been
like
done.
It's a movie. Oh, it has.
Before. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it was.
I liked it.
Yeah, it was all right. I thought it was decent. It was just a little long, I thought. So
I loved it. It's my favorite part of the night, actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. It's just like one of these goofy cinematic things which I like, but then it's all character, and it's got some stars in it, and it was fun. It was
like El Dandy in it, and Psychosis and
Psychosis. Yeah,
La Parka. That was fun, actually, seeing La Parka like wearing street clothes and then his mask.
Then he's still got the mask. Yeah, dancing with girls. Yeah,
didn't have his bodysuit on. It was kind of it's kind of funny. It's really interesting, like LWO back here. And would you think that there'd still be, or there would be a faction in 2024?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right?
Right. I don't feel like it's tough to have the LWO without Eddie Guerrero. I feel
makes it right. It's the heart of it, so it's tough.
I feel like because it's LWO is like a babyface stable in WWE. I feel like Dominic as the heel leading an LWO would be really cool, and having LWO as like a heel stable, maybe.
Yeah, that would be more in line with like the character Eddie was back then, right?
I think
that's a good call.
I think the idea of it was just like WWE own IP, and they know that releasing these LWO Latino World Order shirts is probably going to sell a bunch of merch. Dude, I had one, back in the day. So, yeah, I think it was pretty cool that they brought back the LWO, and it seemed like a very un-WWE thing to do, to bring something back from WCW. Typically, maybe that's because Hunter's in charge now, but the thing always was that like sort of Vince never wanted to use WCW ideas. That's how like the first Elimination Chamber was built, because Hunter wanted War Games, but Vince just didn't want a WCW creation on his show. So very, very interesting. And this LWO segment leads into a tag team match as Juventud Guerrero and Psychosis defeat Kidman and Rey Mysterio in what was billed as a Texas Tornado tag match, which it kind of wasn't. It's funny because I guess the idea was that they wanted it to be lucha rules, which I guess in America just doesn't really, like, the fans don't really understand, because they said Texas Tornado, but then the guys were still stood on the aprons, and then they would just come in for their spots like a lucha libre rules.
Yeah. Okay.
But not a Texas Tornado rules. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why they didn't just say it's lucha libre
Tornado
rules.
is where they're all in at the same time.
Same time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if I was looked at the card, I would have been like, oh man, I really want to see that, 4 of the best. But the match itself actually kind of ended up being a bit of a mess. Interestingly, like, I was just talking about how good WWE are at creating stars, and Mysterio here, he comes out to Kidman's music, with Billy Kidman. And I think it's pretty fair to say that other than maybe it being a bit bigger, there's not a whole lot of difference here from this Rey Mysterio to the Rey Mysterio that WWE had, or, when he turned up into WWE in 2002. You just think like, wow, like WWE just so good at just taking these characters and then just highlighting them the best way
polishing
possible.
Them and
making them just like the biggest stars. Because WCW had Rey Mysterio for these years, not a big deal at all. And then comes to the WWE and they make him a huge star. And obviously we saw Jericho, same kind of thing. And obviously it didn't work for everyone. Like the other 3 guys in this match ended up in WWE and weren't huge stars, but it just seemed like WWE were just so much better at, and they give the characters more depth and everything else. So Rey Mysterio, he did like the 619 back here, but not with the person. He didn't do it as a move. He just did it like as a fake dive spot. So he just put himself back in the ring. Then WWE turned it into a move, and then WWE, they brand it as the 619 and give him the entrance where he pops out of the stage and the music, and just, it's not really that much effort, but it goes like such a long way.
It adds such more spectacle. Yes.
Right. It really did. Something else I was thinking of. So sort of Bischoff always got a lot of critique for, basically taking all the luchadors and getting them to take their masks off, which, as you know, in Mexico is like a really big deal. And the only times wrestlers would lose masks is like in, mask matches.
Retirement? Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, normally, it'd be like a mask versus mask match or a mask versus hair match. But he did it to a bunch of the luchadors in WCW. And I think we can honestly say it did not work with Rey Mysterio. And I guess the argument was like, oh, he was a good looking guy. Let's take his mask off. But it just didn't work. It would have been interesting if it would never have happened. But I wonder if WWE had decided to take Rey Mysterio's mask off, how it would have worked out for him in the WWE. Like, I mean, at this point, he's such a big name and a big star that I feel like it would still be over and everything else. But the mask it's funny how for him it's just such a big part of his act. Like some wrestlers can lose the mask, and they go on to be fine, but just for whatever reason, Rey not so much. And I don't feel like it's not like he was bad without the mask. He's just so much better with the mask. But another one of the luchadors he did take the mask off was Juventud Guerrero. And I feel like when people talk about the Juice or Juventud Guerrero, they think of him without the mask. And I would say he was like a much bigger star without the mask. And he's got, he's got a unique face. He's a pretty good looking guy. And for him, it seemed to work.
Yeah, I actually can't even recognize him. Like, I can't even picture him with the mask. Let me look at a picture of him with the mask. So
yeah, his mask wasn't very exciting, in my opinion. So yeah, he definitely worked without the mask and showed a lot more personality. But
funnily, even to Guerrera on the autocomplete, like mask is literally after his name, the second one that comes up. So people are, I guess, interested. Oh, I see. It's not the best thing in the world, is it?
No, but Psychosis was another guy whose mask they took off, and they should have never took his mask off because his mask is super cool anyway with the horns,
Yeah, I actually didn't mind this match. I get what you mean. It's Iron Claw syndrome all over again, right? We expect so much more considering.
Yeah,
It's like, for me, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't
No,
that bad. Maybe it's just exciting to go back and see these guys in their youth again. Perhaps it
yeah.
was just nostalgia for me, but I kind of liked it. Not a lot, but it's probably my match of the night.
Juventud Guerrero doing all those like leg drops, and he would do like the leg drop from the top to the outside, and sometimes he would do like a leg lariat from the top, and just dude, like he must have just really messed himself up.
His
Like
back, yeah, his spine. Oof.
he's like, I feel like his legs are kind of bowed now. Like it's probably from all these
no.
leg drops they did for years and years and years. Yeah, but I was a big fan of all four of these men. So
Same.
next up, we see my boy Conan K Dog
Mhm.
defeat Scott Steiner with Buff Bagwell by disqualification. Another DQ finish, very WCW, in 4 minutes and 1 second. Now, the story of this match is basically, I think everyone kind of remembers this. Maybe they said this twice during the show, but it definitely happened in this match. So at the time, Raw was pre-taped and WCW was live.
Yeah.
And Bischoff would get his announcers to read the results of Raw at the start of Nitro or during Nitro. So people didn't have to watch Raw because they already knew what happened. So, but in this match, it's a famous, I assume everyone knows this, but Tony Schiavone says, so Raw is pre-taped, and tonight, Mick Foley, who used to work here as Cactus Jack, wins their world title. Like, he makes the comment, the famous comment, that will put butts in seats. But he also says, which I didn't really remember, he also says, he goes, I mean, that guy is going to be their world champion, right? Which I don't know if people really talk about this, how, I guess they do, but this famous Foley quote on the same episode as the Fingerpoke of Doom, and they're kind of slagging WWE off for putting their world title on Mick Foley.
Right.
But then like they do what they do later with the Fingerpoke of Doom. So it's kind of like, but obviously the fun thing about this is they told the fans, oh yeah, don't watch Raw because Foley wins the world title. And then apparently 600,000 viewers turned over to Raw to watch Mick Foley win the world title, which left the end result. So at the time in like early 99 and 98, during the whole of 98, I guess a portion of it, WCW was winning. They had that long streak of 83 weeks, but then it was kind of going back and forth who would win. And the final ratings for this were Raw is War, with Foley winning the world title, got 5.7, and Nitro got 5. So they probably would have won had
if it wasn't for that comment. Yeah.
Right. But isn't it just so funny how that famous comment was on the same episode of, I mean, maybe WCW did them a favor that 600,000 people didn't see the Fingerpoke of Doom because they were watching Mick Foley win the world championship. So, but yeah.
That
and
is funny, man.
This was a bit weird. So I guess, I can't even remember now, but Conan wins by DQ because I think the Steiner and Bagwell get involved, and then they just like beat up Conan, and just, the joke with WCW back from this sort of time is the bow, bow, wow, 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 bow, bow, wow, 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 just got constant NWO music throughout the whole entire show, and just kind of constant NWO being, on top and never really getting, their ass handed to them ever. And yeah, here they just really just beat up and do a number on Conan and then walk out. So yeah. And actually, whilst we're talking about Conan, I don't know if you heard, Sam, but I was listening to the Keeping It 100, the Conan podcast the other day.
Yes.
And they had a fan write in asking a question, asking about our transhuman, the fake Bret Hart reel.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this reel is doing the rounds. So like, I forget, like, it's kind of fun that that's a thing now, that like our videos get round and the whole kind of wrestling world sees them. I think that's pretty cool. And they were asking Disco Inferno and Conan about it, and they watched it and commented on it and everything else. I don't think they realized that it was me. So I don't think we got any credit. Like, oh, this is from the Villain Pod, the Chillin With The Villain podcast. So next time I speak to Conan, I'm gonna have to tell him, oh, that was me, by the way. But yeah, our reels are doing the rounds, Sam.
They are,
cool,
yeah.
Right?
Now they're making their way into other podcasts. So
exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Speaking of round, Bam Bam Bigelow versus Raph ends in a no contest in 3 minutes and 57 seconds. Raph comes to the ring, does a promo where he says there's no competition in WCW and he's just dominated everyone. You can see, because like you look at someone like Brian Clark and you think, dude, this guy, like, he looks like he has all the tools to be a massive star. Like, how did he not become a big main eventer? But this promo, not the strongest.
No. Also, I didn't know Adam Bomb was in WCW. I haven't seen Wrath before, and the first thing I thought was not the first thing, but after watching the match and thinking, I was like, how he kind of looks the same yet looks so different. You know, it's like a lot, just like everything that made him kind of fantastic and
Right.
exciting is just like stripped away. He's still got like a what do they call it, like a singlet thing. He's still got the hair, like he's still like the same, but it's just like every kind of interesting part of him has just been like neutered, you know. That's
Right.
the feeling that I got with this Wrath character. And what is that even?
Well, it's funny you ask that because he was part of this Mortal Kombat deal, I guess.
No way.
Yeah. Wrath with Mortis and then Ernest the Cat Miller and Glacier.
Yeah.
So I don't know who he's supposed to be out of Mortal Kombat, but yeah.
That's funny.
So earlier I said about how WCW was just very dark and like they didn't have many colorful, in terms of actually mean actual, I was going to say colorful characters, but you know what I mean. Like people back here in '99 in WCW, they were all wearing black. They weren't wearing lime green and stuff like they were in the early '90s. And one person I think that really affected was Bam Bam Bigelow here, because he used to always wear that kind of bright, either blue or red flames on his
fiery,
on his leotard or his bodysuit, should I call it? And he looked really cool and stood out. And clearly, here in 1999, he's like, "Oh, I need to update myself. I know I'll be more cool. I'll just go for black." So he's got this black and gray bodysuit, which he wore pretty much the majority of his time in WCW, and it just doesn't have the same effect as his previous costume at all. He kind of, I don't want to say he looks like a jobber because he's Bam Bam Bigelow, he's a legend, but he looked like a shadow of his former self here.
Yeah.
We've spoken about that about WWF guys going to WCW, but Bam Bam Bigelow is a prime example.
And like literally a shadow of his former self, because he's got like the same outfit, but the colors have just been taken away.
Right.
He's so muted. Yeah. Like so dull or muted. It's a very bizarre choice.
Yeah.
It's I mean, Adam Bomb for me at least, and Bam Bam Bigelow in the same match. It's like awesome. But then I think, and then like when you see it, it's like it's not Adam Bomb, it's Wrath, and it's Bam Bam Bigelow, but he's like you said, like a shadow of his, you know, it's just muted. It's just everything's just missing. Like all of the pizzazz and all of the interest and everything that makes it kind of fun is just gone.
Yeah, and that, you know, that was the big thing with the WWF, that people would often criticize WWF saying it's all sizzle and no steak. But here with WCW, it just seems like there's just not enough sizzle a lot of the times. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll just have the sizzle, mate. Honestly, given the
Well, we just spoke about Brian Clark. Next up, we have Brian Adams getting defeated by Diamond Dallas Page in 8 minutes and 58 seconds. It's funny, I mentioned him earlier, DDP as one of the sort of stars that WCW built. It's really quite incredible when you watch DDP's sort of rise to the main event, how he kind of started off as a manager, then he was kind of very low card, sort of comedy heel, and it's pretty wild how he managed to get to the position that he got and how sort of popular he became. I do think a big part of it was the diamond cutter. I think like it's quite interesting to think sort of like that might be one of the cases where his finisher was like the most helpful thing for him. Like I can't think of many other finishers that have helped a wrestler as much. And the one I can compare it to, funny enough, is the RKO with Randy Orton, which is the same move.
Yes, same move. It's the same move, yeah.
Can you think of a move? That's a great question. Can you think of a move that has helped a wrestler get over as much as the RKO for Randy Orton and the Diamond Cutter for DDP?
We talked about this with Santino, like the Cobra, perhaps.
But
not as much as RKO.
No, I don't think so, though. I don't.
No, I'm trying. Like I'm really trying to think. It's like the closest I can come to.
And like
People's elbow.
But
I
didn't get the Rock over.
He was already over.
Like it feels like the
icing on the cake. Yeah,
right. It feels like the RKO got helped Randy Orton get over. It feels like the Diamond Cutter
Yeah.
helped DDP get over. Because like you could say
Yeah, you're right.
Stunner, but again, I don't think that really, maybe to a degree, maybe helped Austin. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. What about like, for example, maybe like
Worm?
maybe the Worm with Scotty? Yeah, because that definitely made him. It seemed like he was more
Yeah.
over than Grandmaster because of the Worm. You could
Yeah.
argue maybe like on a lesser extent, like the Shooting Star Press for Billy Kidman or
Kidman.
something like that. You know,
Yeah.
I think the 619 we just spoke about actually. I think the 619 helped Ray get over as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say to a degree.
I would agree with you, or I'd say all of those are examples, but again, like not as much as I think the prime example is the RKO. So we're not really drawing blanks. Like it's like that's the answer.
If
anyone else has a better one, let us know. But I think I'd be happy saying it's the RKO.
Randy, I'm pretty positive would have got over should he not had not done it. But still, like that RKO out of nowhere is just huge.
Legendary.
And funny enough, DDP, he hits like this. He would do this thing where he would end the matches with different variations of the Diamond Cutter.
Kind of in a way, like out of nowhere.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it was. Yeah. He was the original sort of out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
Here he hits like a jumping one off the second rope,
Yeah,
which is funny because you watch wrestling in today's day and age and we're seeing people doing springboard cutters and all sorts all the time. But here's DDP doing it in 1999. So, yeah, there's not really much to say about this other than the crowd is pretty dead until DDP hits the Diamond Cutter and they go nuts and everyone does the pose, the hand up, hands up pose. Like that's another thing with wrestling. I just don't like poses like that. Just so important to the overall presentation to the show. I think it was that Survivor Series War Games we watched the other day where, because I don't typically watch Raw and SmackDown often. I just watch the pay-per-views, but Jey Uso comes out and he's kind of conducting the audience, waving his hands in the air, and the whole crowd's doing it. And it's like, dude, that's a big part of his act, And I feel like this with the DDP, like I feel like if you've got a famous pose, it just really adds to the whole overall presentation of the character, and that's something that DDP was good at.
I feel another top 5 in the back pocket now.
Oh, top 5 poses.
Yeah.
Seriously. That's a good one. Yeah, we should do that. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So because Goldberg is in jail or still trying to get out of jail, Hogan comes out and he has been off TV for quite a while. They've said this because he's trying to run for president, which obviously I don't think he was, but it's kind of a clever way to, put himself up on a pedestal. And
for sure, yeah.
Right. And because Goldberg's in jail, unable to have his rematch with Kevin Nash, I guess they decide that they're going to do Kevin Nash versus Hogan for the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, I think what makes this whole Fingerpoke of Doom even worse is the fact that, dude, it's Georgia Stadium. There's 40,000 people there. They have Michael Buffer come out for the introductions, and he's like really building them both up so much. He's talking about Hogan. It's like he's one of the most recognizable athletes in the whole entire world, and talk about Nash, like consider the
best of the big men,
of the big men, and multi-time world champion. And it's like they're really, making this out the whole thing to be such a big deal, and the crowd is into it. They're excited, like wow, we're getting a big match. At the time, Kevin Nash super duper over for whatever reason, just super duper over. Hogan is obviously Hogan. And for those that aren't too aware what's going on at the time, so basically Hogan had been off, and NWO had divided into basically 2 parts. There was the NWO Wolfpack, which was led by Kevin Nash, which is kind of like the cool guys, and they were baby faces. And then there was NWO Hollywood, or NWO Black and White, which originally was led by Hogan, but whilst he was off, I think like Scott Steiner kind of took the leadership role. But either way, they had kind of been feuding, Hogan been off, and it just, it all turned into a big cluster. Like they just didn't know when to stop with the whole NWO stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like when you got to the point where we've got, NWO Hollywood, NWO Wolfpack, the LWO, it just, and the fact that they put so many random job guys in, especially, the NWO.
They diluted it somewhat.
Right.
They were like, oh, we've got a good thing. Let's just run it
Right.
into the ground. Yeah.
Right. Like earlier, Brian Clark, he was in. No, sorry, Brian Adams.
Oh, Brian Adams. Yes, yeah.
So I always get confused between Brian Adams and Brian Clark because they teamed up together as well. So,
Okay.
but yeah, and like Scott Norton was in it, and Horace, and then Stevie Ray and
Right.
Vincent Virgil. Just
Yeah.
So it got completely out of hand. So, dude, there is a lot to this, right? So Nash comes out, Hogan comes out. Hogan is for whatever reason not in wrestling gear, just in his like dress clothes. He's even wearing like dress shoes, but
Yeah.
he looked just like he did years later when he went to trial, which I thought was
Did he really?
like the same black bandana and stuff. Yeah. And he's gonna wrestle like this for this match. But
maybe he really thinks these are like his best clothes.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess so. But anyway, what's strange about this? So Nash comes out, he then points at the entranceway, and Scott Hall comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Scott Hall had been off TV, and before that, he had been in the NWO Black and White with Hogan. And I never really, and Nash and Hall have kind of feuded, and I never thought splitting up Nash and Hall was a good idea.
No way.
But anyway, dude, they do like 4 angles in this whole segment, right? So they've got the return of Scott Hall, but not only is he returning, but he's joining back with Kevin Nash.
Yes. Yeah.
So like, okay. Anyway, Hogan comes out. He's in his dress clothes. We all know this. They, bell rings. Crowd's like going nuts, super excited. They circle. They're kind of hot dogging, as I call it. And then finally, Hogan goes up to Nash, points him in the chest. Kevin Nash takes a big flat back. Hogan covers 1, 2, 3. New world champion. Nash jumps up. Hall jumps in the ring, and they all celebrate. It was just a big plan all along. Right. And there was a few. I watched the audience, because I've seen this enough times, and I was watching the fans. And there are some fans that jump up like out of joy and pop really huge for it, but the majority of the audience just seem really confused and just kind of like, what? And I feel like one of the defenses for this angle, the Fingerpoke of Doom, was, the fans never saw it coming. Like, it got everyone. They never saw it coming. It's like, yeah, but does that mean it was good because they never saw it coming or they weren't expecting it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the way you're
totally.
justify it.
Like a twist for the twist's sake. Like movies are the same. It's like, no, a twist is good, not because you didn't see it coming, but because you didn't see it coming and it makes sense and is good and is logically consistent. Yeah.
Right. And this happened a lot with WCW, especially towards the end, where they would do swerves for the sake of swerves when they don't even
and
really...
they're unearned.
Right. And they don't really make sense.
No. So what's the idea of this, that all of them are doing this just to annoy Goldberg, against Goldberg?
This whole thing was basically a vehicle to get the NWO back together and back as one again, essentially. Basically they were going to put back, the ultimate heels, all the NWO back together, just be a big heel stable, and the idea would be that they would feud with Goldberg, and finally Goldberg would get his big rematch with Hogan, and Goldberg could beat Hogan for the belt. That didn't end up happening because I think it was like a few weeks after this, they were doing some segment and Goldberg was supposed to smash in this limousine door with a hammer or something. And I guess Goldberg didn't want to use the hammer. He wanted to do it with his fists.
I've seen this.
Yeah. You've seen that where he punches it through.
And he
catches a vein. And ends up screwing himself up and end up being out of wrestling for like, I can't remember now, like 6 to 9 months. And
dude,
also
he could have died.
Absolutely.
Easily.
It was horrific and so damn stupid. Like,
so stupid.
I can't believe they let him do that. And the unfortunate thing is that Sting was out at the time during this. Like, I don't know if you noticed during the Fingerpoke of Doom afterwards, like the crowd's chanting, "We want Sting," but he didn't come back for quite a few months after this. And so basically they made all this effort to recreate the NWO. I guess I should add this bit in first. Goldberg does finally come out and
Yeah.
the NWO put a beating on him. Lex Luger comes out to save him, and then Lex Luger turns as well and joins the NWO. So it's like all this stuff going on, and it's like, why are these turns happening? What, like, it's never explained why Hall is with Nash now. But I think the main question out of all this, and I don't know if they explained it, maybe they did, but why would Nash give up the world title to Hogan?
Right. And this is my confusion. I understand why they did it, to get them all back together and everything. I understand why WCW, like the company, did it, or the writers did it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what was in the moment, the guys in the ring, what was their motivation? Like, it seemed to just be random. That's my problem. Like,
Well,
why are they all doing this?
Well, the motivation was to get the world title on Hogan. They're obviously their motivation. But why?
But
like,
but why was that Kevin Nash's mode? Like, why was he motivated to? That's the part. It's like, this makes no sense.
Right, totally. And maybe
their
they did
behavior made no sense. Yeah, right. I could not figure it out. Yeah,
like, I guess it was a master plan, because it's supposed to be Goldberg versus Nash, and like, we get Goldberg out of the picture, we can get the title on Hogan. But again, I just don't understand what Nash's, motivation would be.
Character's motivation was, it made no sense.
And it's kind of like, okay, you could say, oh, maybe because he's loyal to Hogan and he wants to reform the NWO. But it's kind of like, shouldn't we be presenting the world title as like the most important thing ever? And this
rather than this like friendship prop. Or clique.
It's funny because WWF, no one really talks about this, but they actually did pretty much the same thing. I want to say a few years earlier, was it? Or maybe it was like very late 97, where Shawn Michaels was the world champion and the European champion. And they built up throughout the episode of Raw where it's going to be Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. And basically Shawn Michaels laid down for Triple H and gave Triple H the European title. But it seemed like obviously people had a lot less issue with that than this. And it makes sense because that was the European Championship. So yeah, no one ever really cared about the European Championship. It could have been a thing. It could have been good. But I think after that, no one really cared about it. But this is the world
flagship main. Yes, right. And so WCW's like opinion is that, I guess, like you said, they're using it as a prop. So the title doesn't really mean as much as like what is going on. Yet the audience probably decided that no, the titles do mean something because they all watched Mick Foley.
Right. Well, yeah.
It's like, no, titles do matter. We'd rather watch Mick Foley.
100%. Dude, when like family or friends that don't know anything about wrestling talk to me about wrestling, that's like one of the first things they ask. Like, oh, are you a champion anywhere? Or do you have a championship belt? Like, people do care about championship belts, it seems, and I guess that would have been WCW's argument, just the story is more important than the championships. But I don't know, I kind of feel like if the world championship is not important at all, like, really, what is everyone fighting over? Do you know what I mean? Like,
that's like the prime, that should be like the prime motivator for these athletes. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's why they're there, right? Ultimately. And then these like storylines and everything, which are kind of more important, yes, are just like incidental. They should always be striving for some sort of goal. Otherwise, why are we watching a bunch of people who aren't striving towards a goal?
Right. Totally. And sort of this, the whole Fingerpoke of Doom, this is kind of looked at as kind of like the start of the downfall for WCW. And like I said earlier, sort of they were going back and forth with Raw for the ratings. And I don't think like this definitely didn't just like kill WCW, obviously. Because honestly, I don't want to jump the gun, but watching this whole Nitro, it wasn't really that enjoyable, the show. I didn't really think the show was that great at all. It kind of dragged to me, and maybe that's a big part because it was 3 hours. But I think ultimately the reason why WCW died and the WWF beat them was because WWF just started doing a much better show. And Nitro,
literally that simple. Yeah, right. People gravitate towards the better product.
Right. And I feel like WWF was way better or much easier to understand than Nitro. Like you said, you watch this and you're kind of like, I don't really know what's going on. And I've been watching wrestling for years.
You did give them props though, like trying to like
tried
at the start, but but that still didn't help.
Right.
I mean, maybe it did, but not enough.
Right. And I just think, obviously things would get worse with WCW. You know, a year later, they'd put the world title on David Arquette.
We saw.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess it was just these kind of moments, like, but the Fingerpoke of Doom is sort of spoken about so much and just sort of looked upon like as one of the, you know, the worst things ever to happen to wrestling. Like, do you feel like it is that bad? Do you feel like it's sort of blown out of proportion, or?
So I didn't know what this was going in. You said watch this episode, like date, whatever. It's Fingerpoke of Doom. So throughout the whole show, nothing happened. As like, okay, we get to the main event. Here's what it is. And what I thought this was going to be was something like a botch, where there was, you know, it's supposed to be like a punch or something, but it obviously didn't connect. So then, like, and that's how like the belt was.
Okay, interesting.
Something like that,
Mm-hmm.
Not like a literal, like you said, like a twist for the sake of it, a deliberate Fingerpoke of Doom. I didn't know it was going to be literal.
Well,
And so I was actually not frustrated or annoyed, because like obviously by this point I'm it's 25 years old. WCW isn't around anymore, so it's not like I have any stakes in this. But that was
right.
kind of frustrating, because I was like expecting some kind of level of, oh, it was just a mistake, and fans are like taking it out of proportion, calling it the Fingerpoke of Doom. It's obviously a mistake. No, this wasn't a mistake. This is deliberate.
No. Well, I think another big thing to point out is the fact that they just had Kevin Nash end Goldberg's streak like the week before.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, you're right.
So they gave all that stock to Nash, and then he like
Just
happily
laid down
gives
for
up.
it. Yeah,
Happily gives
literally.
up the world title to Hogan. It just, yeah,
Hell, man.
it's funny, isn't it? Because it's interesting, just like how, you know, how important kind of good storytelling is to wrestling, but also just sort of how big a deal it can be like bad storytelling. And I think ultimately everyone knows it's a work or whatever, but the fans still want the suspense of disbelief. They still want to believe. And I try telling that to people all the time. Like when they're breaking kayfabe and everything else, so I see wrestlers doing that. And I'm like, okay, yes, I understand that everyone knows it's a work, but they still want to go along for the ride. Do you know what I mean? Like they still want to, they don't want it to be thrown in their faces. Do you know what I mean? Dude, like I'll give you a really silly example. But back in the day when we were doing the YouTube show Being the Elite, we did some storyline where Hangman Page had like lost his shoes or got his shoes stolen. And so then every episode he'd be shoeless, right? He'd walk around barefoot. And then I remember doing an autograph signing with Hangman, and legit like half the people were like, because Hangman was wearing shoes for the meet and greet, and like half the fans were like, "Oh, you're wearing shoes." They were like disappointed. Do you know what I mean? And they know this show is not real in any sense of the word. Do you know what I mean? People want to go along for the ride. Do you know what I mean?
Like that obviously you looked at that. That was like, that hit you, right? Like, oh damn.
Yeah. I think after that he started doing everything without shoes on.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, keep the kayfabe, bro. It's like kayfabe's
sure.
not necessarily kayfabe. I think in this day and age doesn't necessarily mean like what's real and what's fake. I almost feel like keeping kayfabe means like just sticking to the story. Do you know what I mean? And not letting any
just keep it consistent.
Consistency.
I think that's easy to attain as well. Come on.
Right. So like, I always
think it'll go a long. Clearly, we'll go, as he found out, like we'll go a long, long way. All he had to do is not wear shoes, and people would have loved that. And he did wear shoes, and people were like disappointed, you know?
Right. And that's why I don't understand when I see like I think I've seen AEW do it, where they're talking about after the show, when they've talked about what they've booked and the storylines, and they're talking about it like as it's just happened, or even worse, like the storyline is still going on. I feel, to me, it's like maybe talk about this
they
like
do that
5 years later in a shit interview. But do you know what I mean? Like I'm not a big fan of that. Or, you know, if you're in a program with someone, then you're posting pictures with them online or that kind of stuff, you know, pictured together and being like, thank you so much for putting the match together with me. I mean, I'm old school. Obviously, we know that this is an old school wrestling podcast. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just jaded and bitter. But I personally think that I feel like keeping kayfabe, it keeps the mystique to wrestling. And if we don't have that, I don't really know what we have, because we're not a real sport. So I kind of feel like we need that mystique to survive.
Yeah, people watch it for. I mean, I watch it because it's a soap opera. I don't watch it for like, you know, if you're going to deliberately take me out of that, or unintentionally, that's still a no-no. I completely agree.
And I think that this angle was just so in your face, like, oh, this is written. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
This is a storyline.
And that's why it's so irksome, is because for me, this is more egregious than David Arquette winning the title. Because,
Wow.
well, here's the thing. Well, first of all, that episode was batshit, but it was more entertaining through and through.
It was more entertaining.
The sin that they committed when David Arquette won the title was just what we said this in episode 2. Like, the title obviously means nothing then if a Hollywood actor can get it. He did kind of like get it. Like, there's a hoo-ha, if there's a hoo-ha going on in the ring and someone pins somebody, anyone could like get that. Like, anyone could do that. Like, he wasn't like, he didn't beat anyone fair and square.
Right.
That was the issue. But the fact that they've already shown that a title means something means nothing, a year before. But then on top of that, it was also, like you said, just so egregious and so in your face. Oh, it's just written to be almost like a mockery. I find that worse. Yeah, I find the David Arquette thing less of a problem than the Fingerpoke of Doom.
Well, I was thinking, could something like this happen in real sports? Like, could it happen in UFC or boxing?
You mean like it's like throwing a fight?
Right, but it would never be as obvious as this, right?
No, it would be found out. Like, oh, it turns out he put this bet on the other guy, and then he just, like, they'd look through it. It would be like a tribunal or something.
Right.
It wouldn't be that, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because they did all this to get to reuniting the NWO, and then that just kind of fizzled out anyway.
Right? Yeah.
And it just seemed like a big shame because I feel like Kevin Nash was like just getting super duper over as a babyface, and then just to make him into like Hogan's lackey again.
And
like, dude, I don't know. In 1999, I would have been 11.
Yeah.
I used to look at WCW and be like, geez, they've still got Hogan as the champion. Do you know what I mean? WWF has all these like new, young, exciting talents. They've got The Rock and Mankind, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm like, Hogan's still the champion? Like, he was the champion when I was a little kid and I first got into wrestling. Like, they've not moved on at all. Do you know what I mean? So, it's part of me wants to say, I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes out. But then another part of me wants to say, yes, it is. What were they thinking?
What do you think was worse, this or David Arquette winning the title, and why?
It's a great question. So your point I agree with in the sense that it was more believable that Arquette could win the world title than like Nash giving up the world title, because like I said, it was like a tag match and Bischoff was knocked out and he just got put on top of Bischoff, whatever, right? That, I guess, could plausibly happen. I just don't think Kevin Nash would just give up the world championship like that. And like, I think the reason why this one was so bad is like business was up for WCW, or they at least in 1998, business was doing really well for them, 97, 98. And here they got 40,000 people in the building, right? They got, a rating of 5 or whatever it is, millions of people watching at home. They brought, they got Michael Buffer, and I'm sure I think he was getting paid something like $150,000 a booking or something ridiculous. And you just so like, even just taking the match away from them, that's like, that would have been bad business, right? But the fact that they just have Nash give up the world title like that, in that environment, super bad. The thing is, with the David Arquette thing, sort of business was already going down by then for WCW.
And that was their attempt at like a Hail Mary, right?
That was their attempt. So at least they were trying something, and like Russo was still trying to defend it and say, well, the next day we were on the front cover of whatever big newspaper. So yeah, I would argue that this is probably worse than David Arquette winning the world title. Then again, the big issue that I have actually with the David Arquette thing is less that he wasn't a wrestler and more that he just wasn't that big a celebrity, right? You know what I mean?
I guess, but at the same time, they were trying to promote a movie that just happened to have him in it. If it had a bigger star in it, then it would be a bigger star taking it. But I see your point. If a non-wrestler is going to come in and win your flagship belt,
if it was Tom Cruise, then I would be like,
yes,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
No, I get that. I don't know. I still think the Fingerpoke of Doom is more of a slap in the face to fans. It's more insulting to their intelligence, I think, like doing it so overtly.
It's an interesting debate. We should ask the listeners on the Chillin With The Villain podcast. But yeah, overall, this show we watched it back, for this Fingerpoke of Doom. I always enjoy going back and watching old Nitros and old Raws as well, even Thunders. But overall, this show, it wasn't great, and you can see that WCW is kind of starting to kind of fall apart here. So overall, the rating, if I have to give the show a rating, I'd probably give it, I'm going to say 1.5 stars.
No, I was going to say 1.5. Yeah, I was going to say 1.5.
Oh, really? So we agree?
Yeah, we finally agree. Now, does WCW have any more of these ridiculous, shocking moments like David Arquette and like the Fingerpoke of Doom that we could
Yes.
again, which I've never heard of because I wasn't huge on WCW.
Well,
there's more, is there?
Yeah, Vince Russo wins the title as well.
Oh, I actually knew about that one. Yeah.
There's a whole bunch. Yeah.
We're never going to be starved for episodes then, as long as WCW was around, which it was.
Absolutely. My my match of the night, honestly, I can't even really pick a match of the night. That's bad. I'd say just probably the tag match, even to Guerrero, Psychosis, Kidman, and Rey Mysterio's.
Nice thing, the guys,
Yeah, exactly. Kind of obvious, but yeah. Overall, not a strong show, and it's a real shame that WCW ended, and I think towards the end, everyone kind of crapped on it, and it's funny now in pro wrestling, people talk constantly about this tribalism, and there seems to be a big feud between WWE fans and AEW fans, and it is funny, and people say, "Oh, there never used to be this tribalism in wrestling," but there was. I remember in school being a WWF. Yeah, I remember. I don't know if it's worse, but I remember in school being a WWF kid and my friend being a WCW kid, and I'd be like, "WCW sucks." He'd be like, "No, WWF sucks." Like, it definitely happened back then. It's just now it's more amplified because of social media and
because of the internet.
Yeah. And then you get the line, which is always so funny. The people come in, they say, "Just enjoy wrestling. Just enjoy wrestling." I want everyone to just enjoy wrestling. Which
is that Just Incredible's cousin?
Just enjoy wrestling. Yeah, maybe. But no, I think overall, not WCW's finest hour. I think I want to go back and watch Mick Foley win the title now instead.
I think I would. Yeah, I'd turn over Mr. Fingerpoke of Doom.
Absolutely. Well, listen, if you enjoyed today's episode, then please give us a 5-star review. That would help us out an awful lot with our algorithm and everything else. And if you're not following us already on the social medias, make sure you are at The Villain Pod. We're on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And we're going viral all the time, so you don't want to miss out. You've probably already seen our reels and not even realized they're from us, like
Conan
Disco Inferno.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's everything I have to get off.
So I really want 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. That's my goal.
That seems super possible. Yeah. It's like, dude, it's so funny how many people listen to a podcast and never leave a review. And I listen to loads of podcasts and never leave reviews. So
I'm guilty. I know.
But we're yeah. Well, listen, this is the end of the podcast. So as soon as this finishes, I want you listening, to go leave us a 5-star review. That would be very nice.
Yes, indeedy. Leave a review, then have a good week. Till next week.